Whether it's cars, comics, video games, or violins, there's a little geek in all of us. It's time to give your geek a voice. It's time for Geek Therapy. Here's your host, Johnny Himberger.
Welcome to Geek Therapy Radio. Holy crap, do I have the greatest show ever so far. What episode is this? I think this is episode 40. I'm already up to 40 weeks of Geek Therapy Radio. Thank you, my geeks, for growing the show with me. And as a treat for you today, I'm going to forego doing all the social media plugs until the end of the segment because I have one of the king geeks with me right now. He's approaching, I'm going to say, approaching a million subs on YouTube. That aside, I've got the 8-bit guy, David Murray, with me, and I'm freaking out just a little bit. And you can see on camera, I'm fidgeting because I'm just so excited. I've got David Murray here. Dave, how are you doing?
I'm fine. Thanks for having me on.
I hope that wasn't putting you on too much of a pedestal, but you are one of us, as they say.
Okay.
A man of few words. Let's try to milk some more words out of him.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess that's the first logical question. Your YouTube channel, the 8-bit guy. It's just 8-bit guy. It's not the 8-bit guy, right?
No, it technically is the 8-bit guy.
The 8-bit guy. If you type the 8-bit guy into YouTube search or into Google, you're going to find his channel. Guaranteed. So, do you script your videos or do you just go off the cuff?
They're scripted.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know some people... I'm sorry.
Yeah, I spend a good bit of time scripting them out, actually. Yeah. It varies from one episode to the next, but I could literally spend hours writing a script for a 10-minute episode.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right. I've done the same thing where some videos I put up there, I script out, and then some of them I just kind of wing it. Like I put a video about Tesla's new Roadster and semi-truck, and I didn't actually, no, I did script that, but I just did bullet points. Do you ever just do kind of bullet points?
Well, sure. And sometimes a video kind of evolves as I'm working on it. It depends on the topic. It depends on the topic I'm covering. And
right.
Like if I have guest stars or if I'm out on scene somewhere filming, which is rare. Mm-hmm. But in those cases, I kind of just go with the flow. And then I may script some and edit some in, after the fact before I upload the final video. But most of them do start out as a script before I ever film even the first scene.
Right.
So
it's so much nicer. It's so much nicer to have a script. It's like a safety blanket. Like I know what I'm going to say, so it's so super easy. Unlike radio, where you're just going off the seat of your pants. But that's all right. So you mentioned going on location, and that's reminding me, listeners, for those who don't know, and viewers on YouTube who for some reason know my channel and not the 8-bit guy's channel, David, you are just elbow deep in retro tech. And it's not just old computers like old VIC-20s and Commodore PETs, like all the way back to that stuff. Like you also work on keyboards, not computer keyboards for those confused, but like synthesizers, 80s synthesizers. So anyways, one of the retro tech videos, one of my favorite ones you've done, I don't want to say it's the one that made me sub because I think I've been subbed to you for a while before this. But anyways, you did, what is it called? It's that cassette video recorder, the micro cassette video recorder. What was that toy called?
That was
2000?
The Pixel 2000.
Yeah.
Pixel from Mattel, I think. Yeah.
Right. Pixel 2000. You did go on location. You went to the Dallas Galleria. I've got a brother in Coppell, by the way, so I know that's probably within a few miles of wherever you're at. But you went to the Dallas Galleria, and you're like, look how... That was well lit. Like that mall is well lit, but this Pixel 2000, PXL 2000, whatever it's called, I had one growing up. Back in the late 80s, my brother had one, and it was absolute like sorcery magic to me how they could record any sort of video on a cassette tape. But I don't remember it looking that bad.
Yeah. There's been some debate too. There were a lot of people commenting on that, saying, "Well, maybe that unit, maybe it's as they age. I understand there's some issues that they may develop, and but I was able to find some original footage
Right.
that was filmed on those, and they don't look much better.
No.
Really.
No, you're right.
I think the only thing that made it look even worse in my case, because I think the cassette drive was not working quite properly, so that introduced a lot of additional like instability to the picture. But as far as the fact that it has terrible light gain or exposure or whatever, that apparently that's just the way they are.
well, it's like a pinhole camera that somehow has a light. It's a sensor. I don't know. It's, as far as pixels go, it looks like 5 pixels by 6 pixels. Like it's pretty grainy.
Well, you got to keep in mind. You got to keep in mind how much CCD technology. Well, we don't even really hardly use CCDs anymore. We're all doing CMOS imagers now. But I mean, that's a technology that evolved very rapidly throughout the 90s,
right?
And particularly the late 90s. And so they were in the 80s where they were really expensive and they were pretty primitive.
But it's just like old video games. Like, I don't remember, for instance, I remember going to pick up Super Mario Brothers 2 in 1988 and being absolutely blown away by the graphics and thinking, there's no way computer graphics will ever get better than this. So we have our nostalgia kind of lies to us with how we remember how great things looked. Now you put in Super Mario Brothers 2 or you look at footage from that PXL 2000, you're like, I don't remember it looking this crappy. Same thing with PS1.
Yep, that's true.
Like with GoldenEye 64, even something more recent. GoldenEye still looks good now, but it does not look like the way I remember it in 1996. Although, did you ever, well, this is a kind of a dumb question. Donkey Kong Country for the Super Nintendo?
I don't think I ever played that.
Well, all I will say about that is, as far as, us remembering things better than they actually are, Donkey Kong Country is 16-bit, Super Nintendo. It still holds up today. It still looks gorgeous today. It's one of the rare games that you pop in and it still looks amazing. Yoshi's Island also looks beautiful. Even today in 2017, 16-bit, it's amazing.
It's interesting you say that, because one of the discussions I get in a lot with people when we talk about whether a game holds up is it's fascinating when you look at games and when you look at their appeal, like what was the appeal of this game and say, I don't know, 1985 or 1995 or whenever it happened to come out.
Mm-hmm.
And if the only appeal to the game was, oh, look how great of graphics and sound this game has, that would have been a great appeal in those times. But it's interesting, if that was the only appeal it had, then when you go back and play those games today, they're just not any fun.
Right. Right.
The only thing that was fun about them back then was their revolutionary graphics. And so I find myself going back often to the more primitive games, at least from a graphics and sound standpoint, like Super Mario Brothers 2, for example.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not got the best graphics in the world, but it's still a fun game, and you can sit there and play it for quite a while before you're going to get bored of it.
Right.
Because it's fun.
Right. And I guess that's the key. Maybe I'm not remembering Donkey Kong Country so fondly just because of the graphics. It's one of those rare gems that the graphics were superb. Same thing with Yoshi's Island. The graphics were superb for their day, but the games were actually really, really good. That goes kind of almost reverse today, where I don't care about the game's graphics today. I know AAA titles, for PC and PS4 and Xbox, I know they're going to look, as realistic as humanly possible. But the games can still be garbage.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because that's, a lot of people ask why I don't cover the Amiga very much in my channel.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually do have an Amiga episode in the planning stages as part of my Commodore history episode. And I hope to do it justice, because I do think the machine was revolutionary at the time. But the funny thing is, I don't ever find myself going back wanting to play my Amiga. I have several of them in the house. But when I want to play with an old system, I just don't have any real desire to bring it out. And I think what you're talking about is really part of the main reasons, because all of the games that I really loved on the Amiga, and I'm thinking back to 1988, 89, whatever, when I had got my Amiga 500.
Right.
is I was just so absolutely blown away by the graphics and the music, and that was what kept me entertained. And when I brought friends over, I was like, hey, check out my Amiga.
Yeah.
And I would show them these games. Everybody, their jaw would drop with the graphics and the sound. But when you go back and you look at those games today, they're like, whatever. They don't look that great. And the games just, most of the games that I played just for those graphics and sound, they really weren't that fun. I'll give you some examples just off the top of my head.
Cool.
There was one that I loved to show my friends called Blood Money. And and it had this really cool intro with some really great music and some really neat animation of some asteroids and stuff. And then the game was just, your typical shooter game, like where you're flying a little ship shooting and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And to be honest, that game is just boring as molasses to me to play it today. And I can't stand it. But, I only played it back then because it looked so cool, and because of it showed off the machine's capabilities. But yeah, the gameplay, there's just nothing there.
Right. Please don't rake me over the coals for this, but the Amiga 500, that was 16-bit, right? Right? Yeah?
Right.
Yeah. So, but it was one of the first 16-bit. I know Sega Genesis or Sega, not even Master, was it Master System? What do they call it in the EU? Sega Genesis, the Genesis was 16-bit.
Oh, yeah.
The Genesis was 16-bit. It came
out
like...
Genesis, they called it the PC Engine, I believe, in Japan. PC. I'm not sure what the Master System was called.
I'm trying to... I know there's probably 1,000 people listening right now.
I'm sure, yeah. People listening probably going, oh, you moron.
Yeah. That's just the nature of the beast. But I like to invite those people in. Like, if you remember exactly what it's called, comment below. Tell us what it is. You're geeks too. We're all geeks together. We need to be supporting each other and helping each other in our geekdom, not like ripping each other apart and crucifying each other because, well, technically that was 8 bits and it only had 5.
I know, because technically somebody's going to come on and say the Amiga is actually Amiga 500 was a 32-bit machine.
Yeah.
Because it does have 32-bit registers in the CPU, but that's, debatable. It's a 16-bit bus, so I call it a 16-bit system.
It's kind of, exactly, and it's kind of the same thing with, and we'll get out of the segment after this, but it's kind of the same thing with the Game Boy Advance. It was all touted and advertised as 32-bit, but like, really, was it 32-bit? Like, it had some 32-bit, I don't know, like sub-processing or whatever, but it was not, it did not, it was not like it was not PlayStation 1 32-bit 3D rendering. Like, no. The 32-bit was marketing ploy, basically, maybe because it had two 16-bit like chips and like, oh, 16 plus 16, that's 32 bits technically. Okay, well, not really. I get where you're going, but like, not really, Nintendo. I mean, but it was still a great handheld. With that, don't mean to cut you off, but we're going to come to the end of this segment. David, can you stick around for another segment? Is that cool? All right, cool. Well, we'll be right back with more Geek Therapy Radio. During the break, if you are not driving, do not get on your phone and do this, but go subscribe to The 8-Bit Guy on YouTube. And while you're there, go subscribe to Geek Therapy Radio. Also, Geek Therapy Radio on all the social media, Geek Therapy Radio Facebook, Geek Therapy Radio Instagram, Geek Therapy KPRC on Twitter. And David, where can people find you on social media?
The only thing I really have is a Facebook page. If you look for the 8-Bit Guy, they'll find it.
That's all you need. Exactly like I said earlier, just Google the 8-Bit Guy and you'll find all of his stuff. It is glorious. But we'll be right back with more Geek Therapy Radio coming up. David's going to stick around. It's just going to get better and better. So stick around, my geeks. We'll be right